West Virginia, of course, slid off the wrong side of the bubble in basketball. So we're talking some football here at the Voice of College Football. It's our West Virginia show that we do each and every week.
Actually,
What
they
day,
made
what
it.
time? That's why you subscribe and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We got GBD here, Golden Blue Dude. Head on over to his channel. Check out the latest in college football off-season discussion. GBD, what's going on?
I say not much, but really a lot's going on. The channel is really booming right now. But I wanted to address the bubble thing with West Virginia. They actually did make the NCAA tournament, and the cool thing about it is we ended up in an 8-9 matchup against Maryland. Maryland is a border rival. We have personal issues with Maryland because they're one of the main reasons why we never got to the ACC. So that could be an interesting first-round game for the Big Dance.
I completely blanked on that. I just did a live stream, went through all the matchups. Not that I'm following basketball or breaking down any kind of basketball matchups. I was doing it more from the standpoint of if people wanted to call in or write in or fill up the chat with basketball talk, great. I was going to go through all the brackets. And basically what we did was we went through, and if it was a football matchup like West Virginia, Maryland, I left it alone, said, okay, let's talk about what kind of football matchup this would be. And if it wasn't a football school, then we replaced it with the closest football school that was not in the NCAA tournament, and came up with a lot of interesting matchups. Like we had Virginia and Clemson. We had South Carolina and San Diego State. We had Baylor and Fresno State, Arizona and Rutgers, Purdue and LSU, Duke and Tulsa, Kentucky and Boston College, Kansas State and Wyoming, Wisconsin and UMass, UCLA and Appalachian State, Army and UConn, Washington State, New Mexico State, Cal and Virginia Tech, Navy and Kansas, Syracuse and Texas, Cincinnati, Georgia Tech. Here's my favorite: Minnesota and Miami, and Houston and Western Kentucky. Even so I was just I totally blanked at the start of the show here because I just went through that. West Virginia, Maryland, of course, yes. You know what I was thinking too? I caught the last couple minutes of their game against Kansas the other day that knocked them out of the Big 12 tournament. For some reason, I was thinking them out of the tournament, but
they had our number.
But when do they play?
If the playoffs got to that point to where we're having a live show talking about the brackets, a 64-team bracket for college football playoffs, that'd be insane, wouldn't it?
That would be insane. It'd be good for us.
Oh, man, that would be excellent.
Everybody's in it, but unfortunately can't put those boys through that kind of grind.
No, it's completely different.
That would be a little bit much. All right, well, Chris and I were talking before the show, and this is a lot of talk as we get prepared for spring practice in Morgantown in recent weeks. A lot of talk out there on social media about Neal Brown's hot seat status. So he's got another 12-game season ahead of him. And how many does he have to win to get there? Is he going to be kept around? Of course, Chris and I got a chance to talk to Ren Baker a couple months ago. Check out that video. It's on the West Virginia channel. Ren Baker talking to us, West Virginia athletic director. So that was an interesting conversation. And we in a nice way, kind of sized it up for Mr. Baker in regards to how do you evaluate the coaches? You know, what do they need to show you to keep their jobs? But what are the numbers that are out there in the Mountaineer community and for you in particular, GBD, for Neal Brown this year?
Well, I'm hearing the first 4 games will decide whether he can last through the rest of the season. And this is what I'm about to say is my opinion. I don't know how the administration is thinking or anything like that. But the way I'm thinking is we're going to lose to Penn State. I've already accepted that. That's fine. And we'll beat Duquesne. They're FCS. But this is my opinion. If we lose to Pitt at home, that's it. He's done. That's it. That is a must-win game. Last year, it wasn't necessarily must-win, but it was a big game. It was a big game. Pitt, we knew they were a decent team. We thought we were a decent team. We did hang in there with them. We had the lead for actually the majority of the game, and then that stupid 4th and inches decision or lack thereof happened, and Pitt came back and scored 14 unanswered points and beat us by a touchdown. So, I know that's an easy target. Circle the Pitt game, because that's our rivalry. But it really is, to me, that is the game that will decide if he stays in Morgantown or not. Because if we lose to Penn State and Pitt, I don't think we beat Texas Tech, because I think Texas Tech is a better team than Pitt. I think we go on the road and lose to TCU, and then probably go on the road and lose to Houston. So that's why, in my opinion, I think the Pitt game is the game that will decide if he makes it or not. Now, if he wins that game, then it doesn't buy him the rest of the season, but it buys him some time. So that's the game that either, all right, he's done. If it's 4 games, he lasts 5 games, I don't know, but he's done. But if he wins, all right, he's got a little bit more time. That doesn't mean, beat Pitt and his job is safe for the rest of the year. Not at all. It buys him more time.
So are you laying it out like this, Chris, that we'll say they lose to Penn State, they beat Duquesne, they're 1-1, they lose to Pitt, and they're going to fire him after that game, or that's just going to send them on a downward spiral that's obviously going to put them at the point where he's going to get fired at the end of the year?
I don't think they'll fire him after the Pitt game, but I think that will, solidify, all right, it's time to move on from him. I think maybe they allow him to go 3 or 4 more games, or half the season, or the entire season. I don't know. I just think the Pitt game determines whether this is his last year or he's going to have more time. Now, like I said, even if he does win that game, you can't win, you can't just beat Pitt and miss a bowl and you're good to go. You have to back that up with, get us to a bowl, but the Pitt game is the key to getting us to a bowl. If we lose to Pitt, I do not see any way West Virginia makes a bowl.
And then you really laid out a pretty nightmare situation here. If they lose to Pitt, Texas Tech, TCU, Houston, then you're looking at 1-5.
Yep.
Even if they win one of those games and get off to a 2-4 start,
you got to go right then. He's got to go right. If we get past game 6 and we're worse than 4-2, it's time to start looking past him, because that front part of the schedule is so winnable. It's not even funny. Now, the road game to Penn State, yes, I expect us to lose. Now, an upset, that would be crazy awesome. Then our expectations would go through the roof. But I expect us to lose to Penn State. But, Duquesne, that's an automatic win. Pitt, very winnable game. Texas Tech at home, very winnable game. At TCU, well, TCU is taking I think TCU can miss a bowl this year, because if you look at the way TCU played last year, they had a bunch of come from behind close wins, and their defense was not very good. And they're losing a ton of production on the offensive side of the ball. So I think they're going to be in straight rebuild mode in 2023. So that's a winnable game. And then, of course, at Houston. Houston is not used to playing a Power 5 schedule. And Dana Holgorsen, he's not a good Power 5 coach, in my opinion. Now, he had a couple of good years at West Virginia where he assembled a lot of talent. But even whenever that happened, we should have won more games than what we did that year. Like 2018, we went 8-3 because the NC State game was canceled. Well, with the talent that we had on offense, we should have at least had a 10-win season. So, yes, that is also a winnable game. Oklahoma State got decimated by the transfer portal. That's in Morgantown. That should be a winnable game. So you look at that front 7. I mean, 5-2, yes, but even 4-3 is very, very doable. Like anything under 4-3 in the first 7, and I'm just shaking my head. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, they just play so many games that I see as toss-ups right now. It is hard for me to navigate through this schedule and really think that any of these games are layups or they're definitely losses. This conference is so balanced.
I will say this. I am glad that West Virginia pulled all 4 new members. That did help with our schedule. I am disappointed that we don't get Texas at home, but at the same time, Texas is supposed to be, really good. So that helps us as well. We don't have to play Kansas State either, so that helps us. So the schedule did us some favors. And so there is literally no excuse that Neil Brown can use this year. Like, oh man, the schedule was crazy. We got killed by the transfer portal, which we've actually had a good offseason compared to last season. So he doesn't have any excuses right now. So if we can't go 7-5, then he has got to go.
I know, Chris, this is going to be a question that you're going to have a much better handle on once we get through spring practice, see the spring game, and then even get through the next transfer portal round to see if they're able to make any significant additions or if they lose anyone. So this is a better question for, let's say, the end of May. But do you have a good feel for not even trying to add up wins and losses, looking at the schedule? Like, what is your feel about this football team? Is this a 6-6 football team, a 7-5 team? When you add up the roster, the talent, and the coaching staff?
With the scheme that we're trying to run, and we saw it at the end of last year, West Virginia turned into a different team. I don't know if a lot of people realize this last year. So at the beginning of the year, we turned into pass a lot. It was pass heavy. And then towards the end of the year, we saw, Garrett Green utilize more, even Nico Markiel, and we turned into a spread offense. And I think that's what West Virginia is going to use this year. So going by that and seeing the success that we have with the spread, I really like what we have with offense. My biggest concern is defense, though. That defense last year was one of the worst defenses I've ever seen at West Virginia, and that's counting the Joe DeForest defenses with Dana Harrison. Those were some bad defenses. So I think the offense will hold their own, but we can't be in games where we got to score at least 40 to have a chance. I think we have a good offense, but we don't have an elite offense. I think if the defense can hold the opponent to under 30 points, we have a chance to win every single game because of our offense. But can we do that? Can our defense step up and, at least slow the opponents down? You watched last year's games, and not only did they not stop the opponents, they didn't even slow them down. The middle of the field was wide open every single game. Like I guarantee you, whenever teams game planned and scouted West Virginia and they looked at film, they're like, oh man, let's design a bunch of plays up the middle and run a bunch of crossing routes because the middle of that defense is super soft. So if we can solidify the inside part of the defense and at least, slow the offense down, I think this could be a 7-5 team. But once again, that's a big if. And that's why what you said earlier, this is a question that'll be better answered after the spring game when we at least get to see, the size and the speed of the defense. It's not like a real game or anything like that, but you can still get a sense of the athleticism that's going to be on the field.
So 7-5, do you think that keeps Neil Brown in Morgantown? And does 7-5, not that you're going to be pleased by it, but is it good enough for you?
7-5 will keep him in Morgantown. 7-5 is not good enough for me. I need to see us headed in a good direction. 7-5 to me just sounds like a save year. Like I would want at least 8-4 to be like, all right. So it looks like we are headed in the right direction, and not just 8-4, but like no blowouts in those losses, no games where we looked lost again. A competent 8-4 team getting to a decent bowl. That's what I would be okay with. And I know that sounds a little high as far as setting the bar, but we're going on year 5? I mean, why is 8-4 such a high bar if we're going into year 5? And last year we had the same exact record as his first year, 5-7. And his first year he had a lot of excuses, which I provided as well. The cupboard really was bare, and we did really overperform at 5-7 in 2019. But last year's 5-7, no excuse for that, none whatsoever. Go back to the top of the schedule real quick. So we start off the season at Penn State. I don't even have that as a 50-50 game. That's a loss for sure, okay? Then we get Duquesne. That's not 50-50 either. That's a win. So we're sitting at 1-1. Then we get Pitt at home. And Pitt's going to be, I think they're going to be a bowl team again. And it's not going to be on the road. So that is a 50-50 game that I'm swaying towards West Virginia simply because it's a home game. So that puts us at, now this is not a prediction or anything like that. This is the type of season that needs to happen for Neil Brown to keep his job. Does that make sense?
Yeah. This
Okay.
is a situation where he's got to show that he's stopped the downward trajectory and turned things around. And even though it's not going to be some magical, great season, historic season, that it's at least going to show that he's got things going in the right direction.
Right. So we're looking at 2-1 right there if things go the way they're supposed to go. Then we get Texas Tech and Morgantown. I actually have that as a loss. I think Texas Tech is going to be a dark horse Big 12 championship contender next year. They have a lot of talent coming back. They finished strong last year. And I think Texas Tech, they kind of give me the same feel last year as Kansas State did. Kansas State was my dark horse Big 12 championship contender, and they won the Big 12. I'm feeling that way about Texas Tech. And Texas Tech has had West Virginia's number over the past, 6-7 years. So they know how to beat us. So that drops us to 2-2. I'm still okay with that because in my mind, Texas Tech is just that good. Then a critical game at TCU. That's a very winnable game. And if he wants to keep his job, he has to win that game. West Virginia will be good enough, and TCU will be taking a big enough step backwards to where that should be a win. So now we're looking at 3-2. Then the bye week, then at Houston. This is a solid, established Power 5 team in West Virginia going up against a newcomer Power 5, Houston Cougars, who, even though they're making the jump to the Power 5, they're not doing it because of their football credentials, because they haven't been great in football. They've had a good year here and there, but overall they haven't been, like blow your head, blow your mind like Boise State. I would be a lot more nervous if this was a road game to Boise State. So that also should be a win if you're looking at talent versus talent. I think West Virginia definitely has more talent than Houston. So right there, we're looking at what? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2. Let's keep going. So that's 4-2 if we do what we're supposed to do. All right, then we get Oklahoma State at home. Now, that's a game that we have to win. I mean, that's not only a winnable game, we definitely should win that game. Oklahoma State got absolutely decimated by the transfer portal. And even when they had the athletes that they lost, we beat them last year in Stillwater to end the regular season. So that definitely should be a win. So now we're looking at what, 5-2? So these next two games, I would say split. I'm going to say at UCF is going to be a loss. UCF is going to be super jacked up. I think UCF has a lot more talent than Houston. They have a coach that knows how to win in Power 5. He never had one losing season over there at Auburn. Gus Malzahn, I think he's a good enough coach to beat West Virginia, probably convincingly in the bounce house. So, that's going to be a loss. So that's 5-3. Then we get BYU at home. I think that's a win. I think West Virginia, well, if things go the way they're supposed to go, West Virginia has more talent right now on offense, especially. Defense, BYU has the better defense. No doubt about that. But it is in Morgantown. That's a super, super long trip for BYU. So home field advantage should be enough to beat BYU. So that has us at what, 6-3, right? Then at Oklahoma State, I'm chalking that up to a loss. I don't ever see West Virginia going on the road to beat Oklahoma unless we have like a national championship contender team. Oklahoma is going to be much, much better, but that is a loss. So now we're looking at what, 6-4?
4. Yep.
6-4. Okay. Cincinnati home. Not only should that be a win, that should be an easy win. Cincinnati is losing a lot, not just from their team perspective, but they lost their head coach. that's going to hurt. And once again, this is an established Power 5 program in West Virginia going up against a newcomer at home. And maybe these two teams are trying to establish a rivalry. I don't think it's there yet. I really don't. I think we're a good at least decade away from this at least turning into a rivalry. So that should definitely be a solid win. So that's 7-4 right there. And then on the road to Baylor, I think Baylor's going to be much better this year. I think this is a bounce back year. And I think they're going to remember last year, Baylor should have won that game, but the bounces of the ball went West Virginia's way. I mean, I think they're cursed in Morgantown. They've never won in Morgantown. Baylor had the better team, but for whatever reason, things didn't fall their way. I think that's a loss. So that puts us at 7-5. And to me, if you look at their schedule, I don't think that's asking too much. That's not me saying 7-5 if we go on the road and beat Oklahoma. No, that's not me saying 7-5 if we go on the road and beat Penn State. No, I'm not asking West Virginia to win some super tough games. All I'm asking West Virginia to do is to win the games they're supposed to win.
There's no Texas. There's no
Texas.
Iowa State. There's no Kansas State.
There's no Kansas State.
So Texas and Kansas State not on the schedule. That's pretty considerable right there.
I don't think we have Iowa State either.
Yeah, no Texas, Iowa State, Kansas State. I think those would be the three.
Mm-hmm.
There should be somebody else,
all 4 newcomers,
right?
all 4 of them.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not coming up with, I thought there would be somebody else in there.
Kansas. We don't play Kansas.
No, Kansas. Yeah. Kansas State, Iowa State, Texas.
And that would have been a road trip to Kansas. I think that's a loss.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a break.
Yep.
Texas, Kansas State out of the way. Yeah. No doubt about that. Jordan Leslie, still the defensive coordinator. We got a question just about Jordan Leslie, whether you think he's doing a good job.
Nope. I'm not even going to explain that. He's doing a terrible job.
Yeah, that's
should have never been promoted.
Obvious.
That was a buddy type of decision. Tony Gibson should have been our defensive coordinator. Terrible decision by Neil Brown.
And then we've got Super Chat coming in. We appreciate that from Midnight Magic Musings. Do you still want Neil Brown in Morgantown?
Last year was my last year that I wanted him in Morgantown, and he let me down. I do not want him in Morgantown anymore.
So he's going to have to prove it big this year to turn your mind, change your mind. 9-3 changes your mind.
I think 8-4 would change my mind.
8-4, okay.
Yeah, I think 8-4 would do it.
8-4 and competitive in the losses.
Right, exactly. We have to see our program building, not just get a few lucky breaks.
All right, folks, leave the comments and questions here, talking West Virginia football as we do each and every week. So, again, we left the link in the live chat. Please subscribe to the West Virginia channel. We want to get to 1,000 subs. You can help us do that. We're around 860, something in that range. We need about 140. You can help us, whether you're watching right now or you're watching the record. Get on over there. We left it in the chat. It's easy to find. All right, the latest on the expansion talks. Well, so I'm going to throw a few things at you. Obviously, there's a situation in the Big Ten where Kevin Warren's stepping down, going to the NFL Chicago Bears. The Big Ten's probably not going to do anything until they get him switched out, get him replaced, and that's going to be sometime in April at the earliest. Baylor's athletic director came out a few days ago and made a statement to basically say, hey, we're not the bad guys here. We're not running to the Pac-12 to try to grab teams. But if we're doing our jobs and those schools want to leave their conference, then we would be stupid and we wouldn't be doing our jobs and protecting our conference if we weren't saying, hey, we're willing to talk and we're going to welcome you with open arms.
Yeah, I don't understand why in this particular conference realignment, Brett Yormark in the Big 12 is all of a sudden the bad guys. It wasn't it wasn't like that whenever Greg Sankey got Texas A&M and Missouri out of the Big 12 and then doubled down and got Texas and Oklahoma. It wasn't like that when Kevin Warren got Nebraska out of the Big 12 and then the Pac-12 got Colorado. But then whenever the tables are turned and the Big 12 is looking at another conference, then the Big 12 is all of a sudden a bad guy. And this whole situation, people getting personal, acting like kids. I mean, it's gotten crazy over at my channel, man. I mean, it's hit the fan is the best way I can put it. And it wasn't like that with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC. It wasn't like that with USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. But for whatever reason, it is definitely like that with all these rumors about the Big 12 talking to the Pac-12 teams. And all I'm going by is the information that comes out on a daily basis. And all the information that I'm seeing is, the Big 12 is talking four corners. Arizona not happy. It's all not good for the Pac-12. They still don't have a TV deal signed yet, and the TV deal that they're looking at is for $22 million. Oregon and Washington want an equal revenue share. Oregon and Washington are not willing to sign and grant rights past 3 years. I mean, it's just all bad. I mean, how is that on the Big 12? How is the bad decisions by the Pac-12 the Big 12's fault? So what everybody thinks, I guess, is whenever it was open season on the Big 12, it was okay for other conferences to come knocking on everybody's door. But whenever the Pac-12 is limping around, it's not okay for the Big 12 to talk to teams out of the Pac-12. I don't understand that. And honestly, with all this negativity around the Pac-12, you would think that if they did have a signed TV deal or a signed grant of rights, or they are expanding anything positive, they would be releasing that information because they need to counter what is being said if there is some good news. So every day that goes by without any good news released from the Pac-12 tells me they're still trying to figure things out. Otherwise, common sense tells you they would put something out as soon as possible if something good was to be said.
You would think that the first domino that's going to fall would be them signing a media rights deal, and then that either proving to the four corners, okay, this is a decent deal, and even though it's not as much money as we would make in football in the Big 12, if you add everything else up regarding the commitments we have to the Pac-12, the academic status we have here, the travel, all the other things, okay, we're going to stay here. Or the media deal gets cut and the four corners say, that's not good enough for us. That is not going to cut it. That's not going to keep us competitive. See ya. We're gone. But
right.
I got to think that Pac-12 deal, whenever it comes, and like you, I think every day that goes, it is not a good look.
Right.
Because every other conference was able to get a really good deal to different degrees, of course, but a really good deal. And the Pac-12 is just kind of dangling out there, and they've allowed the other conferences to snag all the prime territory, all the prime TV spots on Saturday with nothing left except maybe a late night spot that they could possibly get.
Well, to your point, think about this. So Fox and ESPN are the major TV partners with both the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Or not the Pac-12, but the Big 10, excuse me. Big 12, Big 10 has Fox and ESPN. And a lot of people's argument is, well, ESPN still wants that Pac-12 after dark. No, you worded that wrong. ESPN wants content for that time slot, whether it's the Pac-12 after dark or something else after dark that's going to draw in eyeballs. It doesn't matter. They need content for that time slot. So if they can get teams out of the Pac-12 at a discount price instead of having to sign a TV deal with the conference, in other words, Fox and ESPN, want Oregon and Washington from the Pac-12, even if it's a reduced revenue share. And that's not unprecedented. They did the same thing with Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland. All three of those signed at a reduced revenue share. And just recently, those teams are getting full revenue share. So that's not unprecedented for the Big Ten to want to do that. And to your point, That's exactly what I'm hearing as far as the Big Ten waiting until they have a new commissioner before they make a move. And that doesn't mean that Kevin Warren was holding them back. It just means they want to have that step done and over with, and then they want to talk to Oregon and Washington. And I expect those talks to happen. And I expect Oregon and Washington to say, yes, Pac-12's dying. We want to go to the Big Ten. Guess what? There's some more content for that after dark situation. Same with the Big 12 grabbing four corners, Oregon State, Washington State from the Pac-12. Just because you're taking teams out of the Pac-12 doesn't mean you're eliminating the content from that time slot. Now, is it going to be Pac-12 after dark? Probably not. But you're going to have matchups like BYU versus Utah. I mean, I think that would draw in some eyeballs for ESPN and Fox for that matter. What about Arizona and Texas Tech? Battle of the Desert. That's interesting to me. Maybe it's not the best matchup ever, but there are matchups. I mean, is it any worse than what, Cal, Oregon State? Matchups like that? Because the Pac-12 can only offer so many good matchups right now. And, if you kind of split it apart, give Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten, and then the four corners to the Big 12, then you actually have potentially even better matchups. I mean, you could have Oregon and Ohio. I mean, that would be rough travel for Ohio State. But think about Oregon and Ohio State after dark at Oregon. That would be a tremendous draw for that Pac-12 after dark time slot.
Yeah, the travel circumstances is going to have to be something that these conferences are obviously dealing with, more so in the other sports than in football. It's pretty well understood that Ohio State canceled a home and home with Washington because of not wanting to take a second or a third trip to the West Coast in a particular season. But if Washington and Oregon go to the Big Ten, maybe it turns into, depending on who else they get out there, maybe the Big Ten also goes for Cal and Stanford, and they've got a 16 pod out there or a 14 pod out there if they choose to go to pods, and then you've got limited amounts of trips back and forth between these schools in terms of pods, and you keep them not isolated out there, but you limit the travel by having a 4-team or a 16 pod out there. And in terms of the Big 12. I don't know what the math is on how much they could possibly increase their TV deal per school. I'm guessing that it's not going to increase, and maybe it might slightly decrease, and I'm not talking about adding Washington and Oregon. They would be great value. But the four corner schools, if they get the four corner schools, I'm going to think that's the impact on the TV contract is going to be pretty much null and void, because those four schools are pretty much in that same Big 12 range of value. But what it's going to
I don't
do.
think anybody's going to lose money, though. I think
Yeah,
it could stay, 30, 31 and a half, around that range. I don't think it's going to drop to, under 30 million or anything like
no.
that. But I do agree with you. It's not going to, bump it up, any type of measurable way. But it does set up the Big 12 for the future. And so they'll be in a better position whenever they get to negotiate the new TV deal. I think all the decisions, all the steps that Brett Gormark is trying to make isn't necessarily trying to make the current TV deal better. It's trying to set up the Big 12 to where the next TV deal can be an even better TV deal. Because if the Big 12 can pick off these four corners from the Pac 12, and we're seeing the ACC, they're having issues as well. What if the ACC, falls apart? I think out of all the choices, there's going to be 4 teams that go to the Big 10, 4 teams that go to the SEC. There's still some great choices even after those 8 teams. I think the choices that will still be on the board will be Syracuse, Louisville, and Pitt for sure. And Louisville was a top 4 viewership drawer in the ACC over the past 10 years. Syracuse, top 6, but they have the potential to be even higher because they have the largest fan base in the ACC. It's just football has been very, very bad. And then you bring in Pitt, and the rivalries will make, Pitt valuable to the Big 12. It'll make West Virginia even more valuable. And if you bring them in with other teams from the ACC, then there's you more money right there. And it's just steps to set up the Big 12 in the future to get a better TV deal. That way they can be more competitive with the Big Ten and the Big 12 because they don't have some, long-term TV deal that they're locked into like the ACC and a terrible grant of rights. So they can make decisions like that to set themselves up for the next TV deal negotiation.
Yeah. So to extend on my point, where I was headed with that is yes, I don't see at $31.6 million per team for the Big 12 currently that Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado are going to bump that one way or the other.
Right.
They're all in the range of, you could liken a Utah brand to an Oklahoma State brand. They all have their like school and brand in the conference, and they're all going to be in that mid tier, maybe Utah in the higher tier in terms of actual football playing on the field. So they should be in that range and probably won't have any adjustments to the current contract. I was
I agree.
headed toward the, like you were saying, better setup for the next contract in that they hit more time zones for another thing. So they really can fill up the day, much like the Big Ten's doing, be able to fill up the day from noon Eastern time all the way through to the end of the day with the West Coast and that final time zone. And it really puts them in a good position. And it also they can't compete with the Big Ten and the SEC from the standpoint of the quality at the top, but with just sheer numbers and
Yeah.
footprint across the country, they can keep themselves relevant and um, you know get them in a position to put multiple entries into the new 12 team playoff.
Yeah. And, to that point, I would think, I know Washington State and Oregon State aren't the most glamorous brands out there, but if you want to lock down all four time zones, why not grab at least, at minimum, a Washington State? I think they're more valuable than people realize. Washington State has a top 25 fan base in size, and then there's the whole tradition where they fly Old Crimson at every ESPN game day, so there's a little bit of exposure for the Big 12 if they were a Big 12 member. So I know Arizona, the state of Arizona, doesn't have daylight savings time, so technically they're Pacific time zone in all the way up until November. But at the same time, I mean, having a footprint in the state of Washington, that's definitely not going to hurt, even if it's not the best brand in Washington. So if I'm the Big 12, yes, try to lock down the four corners, but at the same time, it wouldn't hurt to try to also get Washington and Oregon and get footprints in those states. And all this not to bump up the current TV deal, but to put yourself in a spot to where your next TV deal is going to be much, much better because you have a lot more leverage.
So we've got a lot of comments in the chat concerning basically our coverage of this. So I'm going to explain my position and my approach to this. I'll let Chris explain his approach to this situation and really anything involving realignment and expansion. This is where I stand on all of this, is that I don't know what's going to happen. Do I make some
Right.
level of projections? Yes. I don't do it very often. What I do more or less than anything is say, if this happens, then this is how I would want that particular league. If the Big Ten goes out and does X, Y, and Z, this is how I would set up the league. I would set up these divisions or pods. I would set up the schedule this way. I would set up the championship format this way. This is what I would do. I also, you know, as I did in a recent video, said, look at all the things that are happening. We've got a Pac 12 deal that's in limbo. We have a Big 12 situation that looks like this. We have a Big 10 situation that looks like this. We have Florida State coming out with their athletic director challenging their board of trustees. So we know where they stand. Da, 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 da. These are all the tea leaves. Do. Here's the checklist. Here are the bullet points. So it could go this way. It could go this way. It could go that way, or it could go this way. But these are the dominoes that are going to be falling in some order. My prediction would be that this domino would fall first and would affect this one. And therefore, I'm in the position of I'm not an insider. I hear various insiders and they prove to be right. And sometimes they prove to be wrong because they are either valid or invalid or credible or not credible. And even if they're credible, sometimes their scenarios and the information they get even falls apart and makes them look bad, but that doesn't mean they're not doing their job. So I just gather what's out there, and then I put together some kind of reasonable scenarios and projections, and then I deliver the way. Really, my fun in all of it is saying if the Big Ten does this, this is how, if I was commissioner, I would go about it. Or putting myself in the Big 12. When the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, I produced a video within a few days, said, go get UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston. That's what I would do. Those types of content pieces is what I enjoy and major on.
Well, I learned my lesson early in the conference realignment game. So the lesson, and it haunts me to this day. I can't undo it ever. So whenever Oklahoma and Texas decided to go to the SEC, I had some sources that were on the inside of the situation. Joey knows who the sources are. He can attest to that and who they are and how close they were. And they were telling me, yes, this is going to happen. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to do a video on it and basically do a prediction. They're like, yes, you're going to look like a genius, blah, blah, blah. So it was, Notre Dame and West Virginia joining the ACC. And it was supposed to be within a month. Well, that month went by. Nothing happened. 2 months went by. Nothing happened. 6 months went by and nothing happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not going to happen. What I learned was nothing is a sure thing until it actually happens. So I don't do conference realignment predictions anymore. What I do is I look at what everybody's saying, and then I form my own opinion on it. I don't make predictions like this is what's going to happen. I'm looking at what I see, and I'm saying, hey, it looks like this could happen. I don't know if it will or not, but this could happen. So you have to separate, predictions with, what's likely, what's not likely, scenarios, speculation, and all that stuff. Because once you cross that line into prediction zone, that's when you're really putting yourself out there. Because if you're wrong in your prediction, they're going to hammer you. And that was almost 2 years ago, and people are still hammering me over the Notre Dame, West Virginia, the ACC predictions. So that was a hard lesson learned. But I just look at what everybody else is saying. I form my own opinion, and then I leave it up to my audience. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not giving you a prediction. I'm giving you what I'm hearing, and then I'm giving you my opinion, and then I let you form your opinion.
Got our buddy Larry here. Larry, good to see you. He says, I don't think anyone outside of Nebraska wants to play a late Pacific time zone kickoff. I think late night California games are a no for the Big Ten. All right.
They don't have a
So the
choice
only
on
thing
that
I
now,
would
do
say
they?
about that is that money talks and television talks. That's the only thing I'll say about that, Larry. I agree with you that, shoot, put it this way. I hear this all the time out of places like Oklahoma and Nebraska now, that they don't like these continuous 11 a.m. starts that they've got to do on Fox and ABC, and Fox in particular. But you know what? They still trot out there and do them. Oklahoma's had over the last couple of years a ton of 11 a.m. local starts. They don't want them, but Fox says you're playing at 11 in the morning local time. You're playing at 11 in the morning local time. So I'm not saying, Larry, that those schools don't have some leverage or pushback to say, hey, this is what we want, and let's try to manipulate the schedule in such a way that we're not running out to the West Coast playing at 10:30 at night. But at the same time, if that's the most attractive matchup that they're going to come up with, if it's a loaded schedule in any given week in the Big Ten, and Minnesota's going out to USC, and which is a good game. It's not a great game. It's a good game. And that's the best place for it because Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and UCLA are playing in the afternoon, and that's the spot they want it. Then, hey, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah, I can't wait to see a 10:30 Michigan at USC or a 10:30 Ohio State at USC, because it's going to happen. Like you said, nobody wants to do that, but
I don't
Now
know
that
if that's
USC
going to
and
happen.
UCLA are in the Big Ten, what you want and what's actually going to happen, two separate things.
Well, I don't know if we're going to see that caliber of game at 10:30 at night. Ohio State and
Well,
USC or
I think they
Michigan
will
USC.
because not all the time, not consistently, but I think we could see, every once in a while, that big of a game to fill that time slot. I think it's very possible.
Hmm. Jason, I would disagree with you on that one, but we shall see. Jason, Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. I called this like 4 months ago. Ask GBD. Dude, he will tell you I predicted this. Stanford and Cal next? Question mark. Well, Jason, okay, before I let GBD jump in on that one, because you must have predicted that along with GD or on GBD's show. Why are you asking us, Jason, Stanford and Cal next? Question mark. You predicted
Hmm.
Washington and Oregon. Well, why don't you give us a prediction on that one, Jason?
Yeah. All I have to do is turn that. Maybe that was a typo. He meant to put an
Oh,
exclamation
okay,
point.
maybe.
That would make it more sense. Now I don't know. Maybe that was on purpose. But yeah, a lot of people suggested that Oregon and what I mean that was kind of the common sense type of prediction, Oregon and Washington, because Oregon and Washington actually applied to the Big Ten and they were denied. But I think the reason why they were denied is because they wanted to be a full revenue share. Now this go around, if they agree to be a reduced revenue share, then we might see the shaking of the hands. So it'll be up to Oregon and Washington where they want to accept the reduced revenue share, which why they wouldn't, I don't know. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I've already talked about it. Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers, they've already done it. So it's not like they're getting slapped in the face or anything. It's just a strategic move by the Big Ten. And eventually they'll be full share members as well. So common sense tells you that, yes, Oregon and Washington will be the next members of the Big Ten. And then the second step is Cal and Stanford to the Big Ten. Yeah, I would agree with that as well because they add tremendous value to the Big Ten outside of football, the academics, the research, because people don't realize a membership in the Big Ten isn't just a membership of a football conference. It is a membership to shared resources. And the resources that Cal and Stanford had, libraries, research, endowments, all that stuff, what's mine is now everybody's, and what's everybody's is now mine as well. So they do add value in other aspects besides football, and they actually do add value in football as well because they would help the schedules of UCLA and USC. So maybe not the product itself, but they add value in football as far as helping with the travel of the two LA market football programs.
Some comments in the chat about Notre Dame, and Jason says that he believes that the Big Ten is waiting on Notre Dame, and yeah, that's been pretty obvious from the get go that the Big Ten wants Notre Dame. This is not a secret. I don't necessarily know that they need to wait to do anything else.
Right.
They didn't wait on USC and UCLA. They can get Notre Dame anytime. Yeah, I don't see that as having to happen first. I see where
I
the
think
Big
they're
Ten.
building for Notre Dame, not waiting on Notre Dame, but they're adding USC and UCLA. All right, there's a rivalry. You add Stanford and Cal, there's another rivalry that will turn into an in-conference game. So the more rivalries you add to the conference, so if Notre Dame joins, it would be a conference game. Then you're opening up their out of conference to where they could still schedule their Navy. They can schedule Pitt if they want to, Georgia Tech if they want to, Boston College, Purdue. Any of those other rivals of course, and then rotate it because Stanford, USC, Michigan, there would be a lot of in conference rivalries that they wouldn't have to use as out of conference games.
And then another comment made about Notre Dame being forced into a conference. Well,
Uh,
I don't think we're anywhere close to that happening right
Eventually,
now,
maybe.
but it could happen. But
Yeah.
that's up to the conference commissioners to agree on, to get together and say, hey, we've got a sport here where we now have one BYU's even come into a conference now. So we've got one school left, and we can make some moves here to freeze them out or force their hand to get them into a conference. But I just I'm not seeing where that cooperation's coming or that they even care. I don't know.
I do. I'll slightly, not fully disagree with you, but slightly disagree with you on that. I think step one could be. I'm not saying it is, but could be what we saw with playoff expansion. So
Sure.
we're going to 12 teams, right? Top 6 conference champions, automatic bid. You win your conference, you're in. If you're in the Power 5, right? Top 4. So if you're one of the 4 best conference champions, you get a bye week. So number one, since Notre Dame is not in a conference, then they will never play for an automatic bid.
Sure.
Number two, if Notre Dame is not in a conference, then they will never play for a bye week. Now, I will say this: if Notre Dame goes 11-1, they're probably getting an automatic bid. Like that's fairly easy to say, but they are doing. They're not wanting the perks, I guess, of the automatic bid, which is it's okay. But the better thing is having a bye week. Now, the rebuttal from Notre Dame fans were, well, we don't have to play in a conference championship game. That's our bye week. That's true, and that's always existed. So you're not gaining anything by staying out of a conference and that being your bye week. That's always been. So it's still losing a bye week. You've never played, except for 2020 when they played Clemson in the ACC. And what happened? They didn't win the ACC, but they still got into the playoffs. So to me, the smart choice by Notre Dame, maybe not even necessarily joining the Big Ten, maybe it's joining the ACC. That would be the easiest path for them to get to the playoffs. And all Notre Dame has to do, since the ACC is doing away with divisions, is get to the ACC championship, and they're basically guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, especially with 12 teams. And then if you do win that ACC championship, then you get your bonus and you get your bye week.
Well, if our concern here is a bye week, and let's just say that it is, let's say that's a big deal, and
getting to the playoffs,
and having a bye week is a big deal. So I don't want to contradict what I've talked about in the past. It is a big deal, but in terms of it being a big deal in the decision of joining a conference, well, I think that's extremely low on the totem pole of determining why you would join a conference. So
that's why I'm saying this was step one.
Now, it's step one in terms of the conferences forcing Notre Dame's hand. Yes. Or maybe it's just coincidence, but it could be step one. My point is that unless you're going to argue the position of the bye, Notre Dame is still in better position right now because they can make the college football playoff and not play a conference championship game. Okay, I understand that they can earn a bye by winning the conference championship game, but let's say they join the Big Ten and can only win that conference championship game. Let's flip a coin half the time. They are forfeiting the bye that they already always have to get into the playoff to play in a conference championship game that they're probably only going to win half the time anyway to get the bye. So they're going to play a conference championship game most of the time, lose it, and not get a bye.
Instead of not having a championship game and still not getting a bye. I see what you're saying.
Now,
basically, it's the same thing. You're not getting a bye, but you're having to play an extra game.
Yeah. That you're going to lose who knows how much, but probably half the time at least, especially if they join the Big Ten. They're going to be playing a conference championship game against USC, Ohio State, or Michigan like all the time.
Let me ask you this, and I know we're going to 12. I know we're going to 12 teams, so it's kind of a separate argument. But how much has it helped Notre Dame not being in a conference championship in the 4-team playoff?
Well, it certainly
wasn't the one time that they made the playoffs when they were in the ACC, even when they didn't win it, they still made it.
Yeah, so they've made it twice, 2018, 2020. And the first time they were undefeated. 2018, they were undefeated. You can look at it this way. This is how I choose to look at it. And I find this so ironic because in 2018, think about it. They went undefeated. They're an independent, so they make the playoff. And they played Clemson in the playoff.
Yeah.
And they got their doors blown off.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Oklahoma and Ohio State were the two sitting on the fence, both 12-1, both won their conferences, and one of them had to be left out. So Ohio State gets left out. Meanwhile, Notre Dame's playing Clemson in the first round of the playoffs. They lose 30-3. 2 years later, that game is the ACC championship game. Only 2 years later. That should have been the ACC championship game. Clemson winning, going as the ACC rep. And then you don't have to make a decision between Ohio State and Oklahoma. They're both 12-1. They're both conference champions. They get in the playoff, and Notre Dame's out.
Yeah. Well, see, this is why, if Notre Dame joins the conference, I think it would be better for them to join the ACC because of what we just talked about. They join the Big Ten, and the path is not as easy. And I know the Big Ten has been touted as top heavy, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, which is sort of true. But, I mean, you have other teams in there that's, they've been pretty good. Even though Michigan State was down last year, the year before, they were really good. Purdue was a tricky team last year. Wisconsin is always at least decent. Minnesota is up and coming. Illinois had a breakout year last year. Maryland had a decent team last year. So even though there's only really 3 elite brands in the Big Ten, the rest of the Big Ten, you still have to play your A game to win consistently. With the ACC, I just think they're a notch under the Big Ten. So if Notre Dame joins the ACC, to me, my opinion, it would make the most sense because of the reasons we've talked about, the pros and cons of joining a conference. It would make the most sense for them to join the ACC. They get beat up less because it's not as physical as the Big Ten. The competition isn't as daunting on a week in and week out basis. And who knows, maybe their schedule sets up to where they don't end up playing, Clemson and Florida State in the same year. Maybe 1 year they have to play Clemson, 1 year Florida State. And it's just more, it's easier to get to the conference championship, number one. And number two, to win a conference championship, once you get there, it only takes one win. So if when you're having a good year and you get to that one game, it's winnable. So if there's a choice, if being independent is off the table, and Notre Dame has to make a choice on joining a conference, I think the better choice would be the ACC because of the playoffs. But if you want to go with money, that would be the Big Ten because I don't know how much the TV deal would be bumped up if Notre Dame goes to the ACC. It would be bumped up, but would it be competitive with the Big Ten or SEC? This comes down to playoffs or money.
So I don't disagree with anything that you said in comparing the ACC and the Big Ten, except I would even further the gap. I think the Big Ten is substantially better than the ACC with USC and UCLA.
I would agree.
Now, anyone who would have an argument against the Big Ten, as you just said, and said it's a top-heavy conference, well, if we're talking about trying to win the conference and get to the playoff or be the number 2 or 3 team in the conference and get to the playoff, in a sense, that's what matters is
Right.
that if the conference is top heavy and you're getting locked out by USC, Michigan, and Ohio State on a regular basis, then it doesn't matter how good the rest of the conference is. Because
top heavy is better than middle heavy, which is what the ACC is.
I guess, yeah. I'd even say the Big Ten middle is better than the ACC middle. But regardless,
there's a lot more
yes.
in the middle.
But yes, that a lot of Louisville, Wake, that's pretty good football teams. From a football standpoint, no question. You go to the ACC and you're in the running for it. I would think that they would load up Notre Dame with a pretty heavy schedule in the ACC because I would think that they would want to max out their television value, and they're going to a situation where they're determining permanent opponents and then going to that 3-6-6 model anyway of schedule. But yeah, from a money standpoint, there is no way that for as much impact as Notre Dame has, that they raise that TV contract. You're talking about if the ACC's they're in the high 30s, right, per year. 38 million. And the Big Ten's going to be at where? 85, 80,
Yep.
something like that. 80. So that's let's say it's 40 million a year. Well, that's divided by 14 teams. Notre Dame would have to add $560 million worth of value to they're not doing that. They're the best brand out there to jump the ACC's value per team. But once you divide that 14 times, it's not a whole lot per team.
What do you think about Notre Dame joining the ACC with unequal revenue share?
Oh, meaning that the ACC would suddenly tell its members, its existing members, unequal, or Notre Dame?
Notre Dame joins the ACC, right? So
And gets
let's
more.
say they bump up the value to where everybody can get 45 million. It's a decent bump, but not like 80 million a piece, right?
I think that's
So
reasonable.
by bringing Notre Dame in, it bumps everybody's potential value up to 45 million. But the caveat is Notre Dame's like, but we want unequal revenue share. So we're talking about Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina. 5 teams that would probably get unequal revenue share. Would the rest of the teams be okay with making about the same that they already do now? Maybe a little bit lower, 35 million a year. It's not that bad of a drop in order to save their conference and bring in Notre Dame.
That's kind of what I was thinking. So if you do the math on this, let's say it's 38 million right now.
Yep.
And Notre Dame comes in, and let's say that the valuation is that they bring it to 45 per team. So that's 7 more per team times 14 is 98. So say 100 million. They're worth 100 million by themselves. If they say, yeah, we'll join the conference and we get 50, or in your model, Notre Dame and the other top 4 or top 5 get 45.
Yeah. No, they would get more than that because the lowers would get less.
Oh yeah, so, Notre Dame brought it to 45 per team.
Right.
Yeah, and I think those members of the conference that the Syracuse and Georgia Techs of the world are happy just to be able to make the same amount of money and continue to play football, or make $1 million less a year, or $2 million, and stabilize their conference.
Which
absolutely
would still be more than the Big 12.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or write in the incentive as well going forward with playoff revenue. We're going to divide it not by 14. We're going to divide it. The playoff team, that school keeps 75% of it because they're the ones that got there, and we divide the other 25% between the other 13 schools or whatever.
That's fair. I like
something
it.
like that.
Yeah, I think it's worth considering or at least thinking about, because it's definitely possible, and Notre Dame would be avoiding a much tougher conference for a path to the playoffs. So you're choosing more money, not as much as the Big Ten, but more money than you're making right now with NBC. I think this new TV deal that, from what I'm hearing, NBC wants a deal with the NBA, which they haven't had in like 20 years, something like that. And a lot of people think that they're not going to have the money to give Notre Dame what they want. In other words, in the $60 to $80 million range. So if they can't do that, then the ACC, and what we just mentioned was kind of on the lower end. I mean, they could bump up the value upwards 50 million, and that still be reasonable. And then we're talking about unequal revenue share. The top 4 or 5 teams could be making 55 million, while the rest of the league, yeah, they're not making as much, but they're still not making bad money. I mean, 35, 36 million a year, that's not bad.
CBS Sports reported that Notre Dame's targeting $75 million in media rights payout. Yep. They reported that last July, and whoever front office sports has it estimated more like $60 million. So,
well, think about this: if NBC can't give them the $75 million, what they could do is join the ACC, get their 50-55 from the ACC. NBC, they could get a contract with NBC, except, it's not going to be the 75. But to supplement, to get to that 75, yeah, they can get at least $25 million out of NBC for their home games. And I'm sure that the ACC would agree with that. And 25 is lowballing. I think NBC, even though they couldn't do the 75, I think they could easily give them 40 million, 45 million, something like that. So you're looking at Notre Dame approaching 100 million with ACC and then supplementing with NBC for the home games.
Larry comes back with this. Larry's making some predictions here. So he says, I predict the Pac-12 gets 20 million from ESPN, 2 games a week, and Amazon 10 million for 2 games a week. So if I'm adding that correctly, Larry's
30.
predicting a $30 million deal. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
That seems a little high. What we're hearing is more in the 20 to 22 range
Yeah.
total, everything put
They
together.
had their chance with 30 million, but then
Yeah.
Brett Gormark jumped line and took, basically the chunk of that. So they literally are left with the scraps. And ESPN has actually had to counter because of Disney firing employees and they can't afford as much. And the reoffer is 22 million.
I've also heard
100 by Amazon, which is 10 million per year, and then 120 million by ESPN, which is another 12. Total 22.
Have you heard this, that Amazon only wants 1 game per week?
No, I haven't heard that they want 1 game, but I hear that they want the best game. So the best game and then, a couple other games.
Okay. All right.
And they're wanting like a Thursday night, a Friday night, a Saturday night. They want that late night time slot for Thursdays and Fridays, which I didn't even know the Pac-12 was interested in that. I mean, I know they do Friday nights sometimes, but consistently Thursday and Friday, 10:30. Are people going to stay up for that?
Well, see, I posted a video and I threw out all sorts of ideas that I think are reasonable for what the Pac-12 could do. Number one, I would do everything I possibly could if I was the Pac-12 to get that late night Saturday spot on ESPN. That'd be the first thing I would do, is I would really want that late night spot on ESPN. Number two, I would go full throttle on a Friday. I would own Friday night because the average college football fan is starved by Saturday at noon for college football. Yes, we've got our array of American Conference and Conference USA games on Thursday and Friday night. But after the opening weekend, there aren't a whole lot of Power 5 games, very few on Thursday and Friday. And if I was the Pac-12, I would sell myself out to play on Fridays and to another extent on Thursdays. Tuesday and Wednesday, I'd really have to think about that because it almost reeks of desperation and almost reeks of not necessarily being a Power 5 league if you're going to go the Maction route and be playing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
I was literally about to say, what about good old-fashioned Maction?
you just, not that it wouldn't be a good move to say, hey, people want to watch football on Tuesday night, they're going to watch the Pac-12 before they're going to watch the MAC, but it almost reeks of desperation and it looks clownish. And you don't look like a Power 5 league if you're just
I will say this.
Whenever.
The Big East, whenever they did Thursday night games, they did well. So maybe they're trying to take a page out of the Big East and do, Thursday night, which I can understand that. Just try to stay away from Tuesday night, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights. Thursday and Friday, I can be okay with and I can understand because that's basically the build up to Saturday. Once you're talking about Monday and Tuesday, it's like we're actually – this is our break. This is our break from college football. Then we're ready for it by Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a different story. I'm ready for college football every day.
I would also kick off early on Thursday. I'd try to get that game in. You can't get it in before the NFL, but I think what you can hope to do is hope that you've got a good game,
Yeah.
even if it's not the best matchup in the world, and you hope that Washington State and Oregon State are 42-38 in the third quarter
They have a
when
decent
the NFL
rivalry.
kicks off.
Yeah.
And if people are like me, which I'm not saying that they are, even if I'd rather watch the NFL game than the Pac-12 game, if I'm watching a really good Pac-12 game and they're in the fourth quarter, I don't mind if I miss the first half of the first quarter of the next NFL game. Like, that's not hurting me to flip to the NFL game and it's 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. Like, I don't feel like I've missed much, but I'd
Well,
rather see the end of a game. Plus, like you mentioned, people flip back and forth. They're constantly flipping back
right.
and forth, or they got two screens, or they DVR the NFL game at 8:20. If you're like me, you hate sitting through commercials. So half the time I go do something, or I don't mind if I get home a little bit later if I DVR'd the game and I get home at 9:30 for an 8:15 NFL game. You can catch up easily
Right.
to the game, not
There you
miss a
go.
play. You don't have to you can watch a game in an hour and a half and not miss a play. Don't have to sit through halftime.
More commercials.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a straight up comparison analogy. So it's like YouTube. Me and Joey decided to move our live shows to 10 p.m. on the weekdays. And a lot of people were like, why would you do that? You know, we were flirting with 7, 8, 9, but we came up with 10. And the reason we did that is less competition. People are winding down. They're looking for something to watch at 10 p.m. And as long as you're entertaining, they will tune in. Ever since we switched over to 10 p.m., our live shows went from averaging around 60, 70 at any given time to we're averaging between 2 and 300 at any given time just because we switched the time slot. So to your point, that deal that they're looking at as far as Amazon having weekday games, if they pick the right time slot, it actually could work out. Now, what that time slot is, I don't know. I'm not giving the right time slot. They have to figure that out. But what I'm saying is, if they can figure that out, they could hit a home run. But if they don't, they can strike out.
Todd, we appreciate the contribution. Todd's asking, how much will Notre Dame make if they make the playoffs? Well, the playoff contract has not been determined. So that's a wild guess from many of us.
But a lot.
Yeah. It's not going to be the disparity between the regular season and the NCAA tournament in basketball, but still, the playoffs are going to yield a ton of money.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, GBD?
I think I got everything off my brain that I wanted to.
All right. Good stuff, everyone. I hope this means when Todd said thumbs up that he went over to the West Virginia channel and subscribed. So
Yes.
follow Todd
Yeah.
over there. To the West
Help get
Virginia
us.
channel.
Hey, even if you're not a West Virginia fan, listen. We don't. Number one, we don't always talk West Virginia. Number two, you don't have to be a West Virginia fan. Number three, you don't always have to watch our videos. We just need to hit the 1,000 subscriber mark. And on top of that, we do have good content. So you can tune in every once in a while. Not every time we have a live show, but every once in a while you can tune in.
I'm guessing that most of the people watching us right now are not West Virginia fans.
Exactly. There you go. You would be in good company.
Also, keep this in mind. There aren't a whole lot of platforms out there that are talking to the AD of a major athletics brand. So
We did.
Chris and I had an interview with West Virginia Athletic Director Ren Baker, and we're also hoping to have another or future strong interviews with people that you will know.
Well, think about this. How many live shows do you know that have collaborations between a channel that has 40,000 subscribers and the other channel having almost 15,000 subscribers? We have a pretty wide viewing base, and we have a strong following. So there's a lot of pros that hitting that thumbs up, and that's not me bragging or touting. This is taking a lot of hard work, just like Mark. But what we're saying is there's not many live shows out there to where you can get that combination of our experience and our growth.
Tim telling us he's been subbed for over a year.
Good old Tim. Yeah, he's a good supporter right there.
Tim, anybody else you can get over to that West Virginia channel,
Yeah.
please do.
Hey, if you got to pay him $5, we'll reimburse you.
That's it. That is it.
Good stuff, man.
I am setting my sights. I'm going to state it right now. I'm going to state what seems like a very unrealistic goal. Yes, we're sitting just a little bit south of 40,000 subscribers and have not been gaining subscribers at any kind of great rate. So GBD here is catching me quick.
I don't know about that.
But and we've got about 115,000 with all the channels put together, something around there, 115. So I want to get to 100 on the main channel, and I want to get to 200 on all the channels put together.
That's a good goal. I like it. My goal is to be at 20,000 by the end of the year.
I think you're going to get there.
And we had a great February, and we have a good start to March, which is usually the down month. So hopefully that's a sign of a great year.
Absolutely. And John has done some work for us as well, made it very easy for all of you. So you don't even have to try to run over there. I put the link in the chat earlier. John did it right there. So, hey,
no excuses.
It's right there for you. Just hit the link, head on over there, subscribe. We appreciate it. GBD, thanks for making this happen.
I appreciate it, man. I always have a good time. I hope everybody enjoys themselves. That's why I try to tell everybody, we're not proclaiming to be the biggest, baddest thing out there. But if we've entertained you for an hour, hour and a half or whatever, then we've done our job. And if you like to be entertained and gain some knowledge from Mark, not from me, you're not gaining any knowledge from me. You're just gaining entertainment from me. But if you also want to gain some knowledge from Mark, then you really need to hit the subscribe button and help us get to 1,000.
GBD, thank you so much for doing this. Without GBD, we don't have a West Virginia channel. We don't have a show here on the Mountaineers live show that we do every week. So
let's take it a step further. Without Joey, there wouldn't be Mark Rogers and Golden Blue Dude. How about that?
That's very true. That's very true.
And there would be no Ren Baker interview.
And absolutely there wouldn't be. And
so shout out to Joey, man. Your work does not go unnoticed.
No, it does not. Joey's working hard every day for a lot of us.
But some days hardly working. Not gonna lie, some days he's hardly working.
well, we'll give him those
for that one.
We'll give him those days. And GBD, certainly take this with all due respect, because without Joey, I may not have run into you, because I'm not out there looking at YouTube channels very often at all. So
we are focused on our work.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey, man, I can't wait to see you on the next one, man. It's going to be good.
For sure. Everybody, let's see here at the Voice of College Football. Our next show is we got a Big Ten live show tomorrow night, Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm guessing GBD is going to be live at 10 Eastern Monday night.
Yes, sir.
All right. 6 with us, 10 with GBD on Monday night.
Hey, there you go. That's a good day right there.
We'll see you guys soon.